I think making the first 100 grand was the hardest part. And then once you do it, it's just doing more of the same. $1 million happens automatically. And then you realize that it's not that big of a deal. And then you obviously make bigger goals for yourself. You start to take bigger chances. You invest in an office, you hire a team, and then stuff gets real.
Mike Dillard, that I'm going to introduce you to in just a second, is an amazing person, someone I've been able to learn from for years now. And I'm going to keep this intro really short and sweet because you're going to find out just how powerful this is. Because if you're wanting to be able to build a business that gives you more freedom, has you being able to earn the money that you want, has you being able to impact people whilst you're doing the work that you love, this episode, this conversation is for you. And I know I sound super confident saying that, and it's for a very good reason, because here's why.
Yeah, my name is Mike Dillard, and I have been a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was about 18 years old in college. Started waiting tables in high school, realized that I did not like being told what to do, when to work, how much I could make, and would get home at about 1 a.m, see Tony Robbins on TV. And that just showed me that there were other opportunities out there, because this was late 90s. So that's how I got my start, and failed miserably for a good 5 years, didn't make a dime. Finally had a mentor give me a really valuable piece of advice. And my lifelong goal at that time was to make what he was making, which was $50,000 a month.
Now, I'm really serious. I want us to be able to go through that again, because what Mike is putting down, I want to make sure we are picking up, because for the rest of this conversation, there is so much. I would highly recommend you seriously get a pad and pen, start taking some notes down, because this is about practicality. This is not about just consuming more information. This is about you actually knowing what it is that you need to do from today, from right now, for you to be able to build the business and the life that you really love.
My lifelong goal at that time was to make what he was making, which was $50,000 a month. And he said, Mike, if you want to make $50,000 a month, you have to become a person that's capable of actually making that. And up until then, I thought that success was going to come from an opportunity or product or timing or some kind of marketing system, anything but myself. And obviously that didn't work. So that was the big wake-up call. I started really investing in myself, my education, my skill sets. And in about 18 months, I'd made my first $1 million business.
Now, for so many, and this could be you want to be able to have the goal of earning $1 million per year. And why I wanted to ask Mike, well, what does it actually feel like? What actually happened when he made his first million?
That was the hardest part. I think making the first 100 grand was the hardest part. And then once you do it, it's just doing more of the same. $1 million happens automatically. And then you realize that it's not that big of a deal. And then you obviously make bigger goals for yourself. You start to take bigger chances. You invest in an office, you hire a team, and then stuff gets real. And then responsibilities show up, and if you don't succeed, people don't eat, they have to get fired. And that's when it doesn't become a game anymore, for sure.
Now, I've got to be perfectly honest. This next question that I asked Mike, he answered much, much wiser from the initial question that I actually asked him. But if you're really wanting to be able to become a millionaire, have $1 million business, and you're working hard, you're really focusing, you're ambitious and really wanting to make this work, then this is profound for you to slow down and take this in.
The most dangerous thing that I've run into a few times during my career is once you get there, you think that it's just going to keep going. It's going to stay that way. And the more successful your product is, your offer is, the more revenue that's coming in, you just think that that's going to consistently continue. And in every single case, that has not happened. So in fact, the more successful your product is, and the faster you're selling it, the more momentum you have from a marketing perspective, the faster you're going to end up burning through your target audience. And I would have to say that most products have, if they're really, really popular and you're going all in on the marketing side, have about a 2 to 3 year shelf life. And then they're going to start to drop off quite quickly. And the challenge is if you've built up your lifestyle, your overhead from a business standpoint, to coincide with that ramp up in revenue, and then all of a sudden that revenue drops and you're left with the overhead that hasn't dropped, that's when you can definitely get into trouble.
So let's be perfectly honest. The reason why, well, I believe this, is the reason why you, me, or anyone else doesn't have the business that they want, doesn't have the success that they want, is because they have not become the person needed to be able to create that outcome. So which is why I asked Mike, well, then what do we need to do so that we can become that person to be able to have that outcome?
Well, it's interesting. There's not a lot of us who've made it up to that mark. So it's not advice that's given out very often, and it's not advice that people want to hear either. It's the more parental type of warning, which is like, it's not going to happen to me. So I'll share it with folks, and then it's up to them to figure it out for themselves. But unfortunately, when success is rolling in and you're in momentum and things are happening and clicking and it's just rocking, your brain doesn't work that way. When it's seeing a positive result in dopamine and serotonin coming in every day, it expects that to keep happening. To think that it's suddenly going to change, it just doesn't compute for folks until you've seen it. So yeah, that's all you can do is give people some advice and words of wisdom after doing this for a couple decades now. So.
Now, just one reason why I love, respect, and admire Mike so much is because he is very public about the losses, about the hard times, about the hardships that he's been able to go through. And I do believe these are quite inevitable, that we're going to have hardships through our journey and that we shouldn't expect them not to come up. So the important part is, what do we do? How do we actually get through those hard times so that we can get to the achievements, to the success, to the outcome that we want? And that's where Mike shares this so well.
The biggest one that I went through, oh gosh, I've lost seven figures 3 or 4 times now. The first was a website platform that was not coded correctly, because I wasn't a software engineer. I couldn't determine if it was being coded correctly, and it basically just fell and collapsed in on each other and turned into spaghetti code. So that was $1 million investment that went awry. The second one was my most successful company. We did $3.2 million in revenue in our first week, 8 figures in our first year. And then that business got defrauded by a con man 18 months in. And that was the most challenging thing I've ever been through in life, just in general, because being in the public spotlight as I have been, and being recognized in grocery stores and hotels and things like that, and then having your reputation put into question by a different individual that did not have good intentions, was a really, really challenging thing to do, to have to go through that publicly. So I would say that my biggest challenge. My business partner at the time, from the stress, got cancer. So we were dealing with the legal side and helping the authorities prosecute them. We were dealing with the fallout of losing 80% of our revenue overnight. Robert was going through chemo. I was getting a divorce, and all of that was happening at once. So that was a good 3 years of hell, for sure.
So let's just take a breath right now, because this is really important. What is it that we need to do when we hit a rough patch? Because Mike shares utter gold.
I reached out to a mentor of mine who had been through a similar situation years ago. Extremely successful individual, has made hundreds of millions of dollars online, and he's in his early 60s now and had a similar situation. And his biggest piece of advice was just be completely transparent. So the hard part about that is, as soon as we saw something that was going on, we called our attorney. Our attorney called the government. We all got together. Here's what's going on. And the first piece of advice you get is you can't say anything. You can't put anything out online. You can't talk to anybody. You can't respond to anybody. It's now a legal matter, and that brings up potential liabilities. It could throw the case off. You just have to keep your mouth shut. So what do you do when you have an audience of millions of people who are wondering what's going on and you can't say anything about it? That was really, really difficult. So when we finally could, I took my mentor's advice and wrote a 25 page blog post and just told the whole story, put the affidavits in it, the legal, all of the legal testimony and everything. And I just said, hey guys, here's exactly what happened. We can finally talk about it now, for better or worse. Here's the mistakes we made. But that's it. And that's all we could do. So everybody's going to run into a challenge in business. Everybody's going to screw up and make mistakes. The single best thing that you can do is just be completely transparent about it and own it up. And so the response that we got from that post was 99% positive. And it actually strengthened the relationship that my audience has and customers have with us and myself, because they know, hey, even if something goes wrong with Mike's business or the people he has on his platform, he's still going to be honest about it. And that is the right move to make in any circumstance.
So we're able to learn so much from other people's mistakes, other people's hardships, just like what Mike has shared with us so far in this conversation. And that's where I want to turn it around. And I want to know, what's the highest high? So you and I can be expanded and can see what other people have been able to achieve so much, so that we can actually grasp. We have a model to be able to mimic for us to be able to create the achievements that we really then want.
There's a couple of moments that stand out. The first one that was a really big game changer for me, I had been advertising for the first time, wrote an ebook, my first ebook, which was really the first product I had ever started to sell back in 2007, and wrote it in Microsoft Word. None of the tools that exist today existed back then. And so I did the design work myself. I never had it edited. I had it printed at Kinko's in the little cheap plastic spiral binding. And I just started advertising that on Google AdWords and sent people to a sales page to buy the book, and for $39. I would go down into the post office and pick up the flat rate envelopes and the big plastic bins and brought some home, and all of a sudden orders started to come in, and within 3 months I was making around $50,000 a month worth of that book. And every day I would just wake up in the morning, see the orders come in, would sit here at the table, address them by hand, stuff them by hand, take them to the post office every day at lunch, and did that for a couple of months and got to know all the staff there. And here's Mike again with his bins of books. And so that was the first time I'd really made a significant amount of money, and I was still involved in the minutia of the business, answering every support ticket, every email. I didn't have any employees whatsoever. So that was the first big win. The next one was obviously that $3.2 million launch. That was obviously an unbelievable event to be able to experience. One of the bigger failures that I had recently in the last couple of years, what was it? 2014, 2015, I decided to do something completely different. I wanted a new challenge. So I decided to develop a hydroponic food system. And the goal here was to put clean food in everybody's house. I was a big fan of Peter Diamandis and the work he was putting out around the decentralization of all of these different markets and niches. We've got Uber, we've got 99 Designs and Odesk and Airbnb and all of these decentralized companies that are disrupting markets. And I was like, why hasn't anyone decentralized the ag industry and the farm yet? Because I've always lived right by Whole Foods down here in Austin, and you have to be wealthy to eat food that is not covered in poison. And that, I think, is wrong. So that was the question I asked myself, is why hasn't anyone decentralized the ag industry? Because if you can get rid of the tractor and the big farm and the 18-wheelers and the shipping boats and the containers and the distribution center and then the retail store, you can reduce food costs by about 90%, water waste 99%, pesticides by 100%. And so everybody gets to eat clean organic food for almost next to nothing. But nobody had really tackled that problem yet. A few had attempted. There are definitely some home hydroponic systems you could buy that were for sale, so I bought all of them. They were not practical. You had to do that as a hobby. You had to really get educated on how to take care of the plants, balance the pH, the nutrients, and all of that stuff. And it was really like gardening, which is not going to change the world from a food perspective. So I started just by jumping on Amazon, buying every ebook that I could on hydroponics. I made a little Photoshop theme out of a Voss water bottle with plants in the middle that I would send to industrial design firms, and I just started cold calling those companies to say, hey, here's my idea, can you help? because I've never developed products. I didn't really know anything about food production. And so it was literally starting from zero with no prior experience. Bottom line is we spent the next 2.5 years figuring it out, worked with a great company in Silicon Valley to help me design it. It's down in the garage right now. But we built a working prototype, the first fully automated food system for your home, and Wi-Fi antenna, pH sensors, nutrient pumps and automatic dosing, LED lights that would mimic and follow the same cycle as the sun as the seasons changed. And the whole thing worked. So all you had was an app, and you would drop in a little seed pod. It would grow about $5,000 a year in organic food for about $500. And it was beautiful. It looks like a piece of art. So the original estimate on developing that was about $500,000, which I funded. And 2.5 years in, we've just got a working prototype. We're still nowhere near production ready. I have never designed or produced a physical product before, so I'm figuring all of this out as I go. And I'm finally at a point where I'm like, guys, how much longer is this going to take? How much more money? 3 more years and another $2 to $3 million. And that was a very big transition point, because people have been following the development and the story. My audience has expectations. Continuing down that road was not going to be tenable from a financial situation for myself, or the amount of stress that I was putting myself through to develop that and fund. And at the same time, a competing company finally came out with a product that did the same thing we did. It didn't look as nice, but it was a more elegant design, if you will. And it would have retailed for about 1/3 the price that ours would have. So I couldn't go in good faith to friends or family or colleagues and raise money, knowing that we'd have a second-in-class product that we're going to take to market, because the marketer in me is already making the side-by-side comparison for the website, right? And we lose in almost every category except one. So that was a really big decision. 2.5 years of my life, well over $1 million in money put into that project. It's beautiful. People love it. And now we've got to pull the plug, which is essentially what I did. So that was one of the biggest challenges that I went through. But the question you want to ask yourself in a situation like that was, how can I make the best of something that didn't work out, which is going to be, it's what entrepreneurship is all about, right? So I ended up calling the founder of that other company, and initially wanted to pursue a licensing deal with them because their system didn't look that great and ours did. It's like, hey, take our design, put your stuff in it, and let's both create a win. They were way too far in momentum with what they were doing, which was obviously understandable, but they were still early from a company standpoint. So I ended up investing 6 figures into them. And that's probably going to recoup all of the funding that I put back into the original project. And the same end result still happened, which is clean food on people's.
Now, this is really important because I do believe so many of us can fall into a sunk cost fallacy. We might be working so hard on a project, on a business, on something, and we continue to work on it, thinking just working harder, or just simply thinking that we just need to continue on that same path because we've already done so much work in the past leading there. That could become a problem because sometimes we do need to change directions. But how do we know when to change directions? How do we know when to give up one thing and when to move on to another? How do we know when to continue on moving on the same path? That's what we need to find out.
It's a hard decision, and there is no, I don't know if there is a litmus test. I just talked to a founder of a product that I use yesterday for the podcast, and they started a business and developed a product, another physical tech product, put a bunch of money into it. I think about 12 years ago, they launched it. It didn't start to sell until about 3 years ago. So they went 8 or 9 years of just keeping on, seeing what they can do till it finally caught on. So my advice to them a long time ago would have been to probably move on. That was not their sole business. That was a side passion project for them. So they didn't have to force it to work. But they believed in it. And the feedback from the customers they did have was phenomenal. It was a life-changing experience for them. So they felt extremely passionate about the mission. And so they just kept moving forward, but they did it slowly. They did it responsibly. And then it finally caught on, and they've 10x'd every year for the last 3 years. So it's turned into a massive business, but how would you know to stick through it for 10 years of failure? You just don't. So the advice that I would have for folks is just to do it responsibly. One of the blessings and the curses of having a lot of money is that you use that money to solve whatever problem comes up. And there's always going to be more problems, which are always going to take more money, which then leads to a problem, right? So if you put restrictions around yourself, which is one of the biggest lessons I learned going through that process, is rather than being willing to write a check to continually fund every single step of that production and development, I would have come up with a budget, let's just call it 100 grand, and I would have forced myself to stay within that budget no matter what, which is going to force you to get resourceful and creative, and to do things in a much more efficient way rather than just solving the problem by writing a check and making it go away. So that is, to me, the biggest lesson that I took out of that process that I will use in my businesses now moving forward. And as long as you're within that budget, keep pushing forward, keep learning. And if it's not a burden on you and causing your family to break up or divorce or whatever, then just keep going, because you're going to learn something from it. And ideally, you'll figure it out until the point where you're like, you know what, my heart's not in this anymore. I'm not passionate about it. And then maybe that's the time to shut it down.
Now, I have to pause here and slow down for just a second, because I asked this upcoming question for Mike, and he has a profound answer. And he answers it with one word. And I think it is absolutely brilliant, because it is something I ask a lot of people that I admire, that I look up to, that are doing such fantastic things. And that is, what does success feel like to you?
Expected. Just expected. Yeah.
Now, something that can be holding you, me, and others back is the need to want to feel certain. And this can be a bit of a paradox, because wanting to feel certain to be able to then go after and be able to do things isn't actually practical, because how are we supposed to have certainty? Can we actually really have certainty? And when it comes down to us being able to figure out what's happening between our ears and that urge for certainty and feeling safe and secure, but then wanting to be entrepreneurial and build these things, how does that actually work?
Nobody feels certain. Well, I say that with a thing. I knew with 100% certainty that I was going to be an entrepreneur and work for myself. I was willing to do anything. I was going to do that or literally die trying. So when I first graduated college, packed up my truck and moved to California to work with a mentor of mine, I didn't have any money. I moved into a $300 a month apartment. I didn't have any furniture. I had 2 forks, 2 knives, 2 bowls, 2 plates. That was it. And my computer desk from school. And the next day, 9/11 happened. So all of the business plans that we had then went out the window, because nobody was interested in talking about what we had to talk about at that point after that situation. So immediately had to go get a job, which was not enough to pay my bills. And my plan at that point was, okay, maybe I'll have to go to a campsite or rent a storage unit, set up a cot in there, live in there. Maybe I'll shower at a gym. And that was my plan. And that's what I was going to do. So there was no plan B or secondary option. I was going to keep going no matter how long it took or what it took. So that level of certainty was there. And yet within that, I pursued that for 5 years without making a dollar. So I failed over and over and over and over again. And it was not easy. It definitely challenged me in the deepest ways that you could possibly imagine. But giving up was infinitely worse than having to wait tables, in my mid-20s. And I weighed on my friends that I went to high school with, which was, horrifying. It's a very humbling experience. We all went to the same school and the same college, and they've got their corporate jobs and their new BMWs, and you're, waiting tables and serving them food. It's a very humbling experience. So.
And so this is where I just have to point blank ask Mike, and he does such a fabulous job here. I just want to be able to know from here, from today, what is it that Mike recommends, that Mike thinks that we should be doing to be able to build the success, to build the business, to build the life that we want?
The biggest piece of advice I'd have for any new entrepreneur is, especially in this time and age, I was very fortunate in a way that the internet was just getting started when I was just getting started. We didn't have YouTube, we didn't have social media back then. So when I really started to dive in deep and acquire these skill sets, it was through paper courses, it was through going to events, and it was by reading books for hours and hours a night. And we didn't have YouTube or Instagram to distract us, right? That's all there was. It was that or watch television. So in a way, that was a huge advantage. Even though we didn't have all of the amazing tools that are available to entrepreneurs now, it forced us to go really deep and to focus and to spend time on that subject matter, where today, I think there's so many distractions, there's so many potential opportunities, there's so many skills to go learn and paths to go down. The hardest part is just really deciding, what are you going to master? That's the biggest secret to making that transition from an employee to a self-made entrepreneur, paying his or her own bills, is mastering one skill set. If you can master a skill set, then you can go get paid by clients to do that for them on an outsourced basis, an agency basis, whatever it may be. And now you're working for yourself. You're getting paid to become world-class at whatever that activity is. And that's just your springboard to whatever else you want to do at that point. So for me, that skill was copywriting. Today, the modern version of that is probably managing people's social media, activities and accounts. But that's the ticket to success, is mastery. And you just have to be unbelievably disciplined about it today to shut off YouTube and dive into the book, dive into the course, 2-3 hours a night minimum, remove the distractions. I think this year I deleted Facebook and Instagram and YouTube off of my phone for 2 or 3 months. I just deleted the app, and it was the best thing I ever did. I got so much work done, and it was absolutely amazing. So be willing to do that.
Now, it is pretty common out in the collective that we can be seeing a lot, and that is us needing or wanting or should having a mentor. But what is a mentor, and how can we actually best use the advice, use the learnings, use the breadcrumbs that someone's been able to leave behind from the success they've been able to create for themselves, so that we can have a map, a compass, to be able to have a fast track for us being able to get there?
I use the word mentor very loosely. I would consider anyone that I've bought and read a book from and learned from a mentor. So I never had a mentor that was literally showing me the ropes and on the phone with me on a regular basis, but I had an incredible number of teachers and just shelves and shelves of books that I bought and read. So a mentor is great if you can find one. I didn't really had one. I had coaches and people that would give me advice, but I wouldn't say that I had an actual mentor. So virtual mentors are great. It really is, the amount of information is overwhelming these days. It's all out there. It's available, and it's mostly for free these days. It really is up to you to have the discipline to dive in and experience that. And from a mentorship standpoint, if you want to learn from someone directly and build relationships with, the single biggest piece of advice I can give you when it comes to that worked for me is to say thank you to the people that you've learned from. So when I was first getting started and I wanted to build a relationship with the people who were where I wanted to be, it was always, hey, wrote an email, whatever it may be, phone call, voicemail, however I could get a message to them with a testimonial of what I learned from them and what I wanted to accomplish, and it was just a thank you. And you would be shocked at how few people actually send in testimonials these days, because it might be in the form of an Instagram DM or a Facebook comment where they'll acknowledge the impact that you've had and that your work has had on them, but that's just commonplace. To get a 1 or 2 page letter or a 5-minute video from someone is something that stands out. It has a lot of meaning. There's more information in there. It gives me time to learn more about you. And that is the best way to build a relationship with someone. The folks who do that with me in my work, who send in videos or things like that, like they're almost instant friends, where it's like, that's awesome. I'm super stoked that my work had that kind of an impact on you and changed your life. Thank you for letting me know, because that's what keeps me motivated. And many of those individuals I just have personal relationships with now and call friends.
Now, why is it that you haven't created the success that you really want? I asked Mike, and he gives us a point blank answer.
They don't want it bad enough. The only reason you don't achieve what you want to achieve is if you give up, or you're not disciplined about it. You make excuses. You invest your time and money into other things. You don't pursue mastery, which is what I did for those 5 years, thinking again that success was going to come from this other thing. So I still see people doing that all the time, expecting to buy a product or a course or whatever, and where's the money? And that's just not how it works. So you get paid what you deserve to get paid, and you get paid in proportion to the value that you put out there in the world. So one of the biggest lessons that I learned, or at least the way that I like to teach it, is raising your PVL. So I call that your personal value level. So if you want to get paid more, great. Figure out how to increase your personal value level that you have to offer other people in the world, and do that. That typically happens by mastering a new set of valuable skills that not a lot of other people have. A lot of people can wait tables. It's not a tough gig. So you're not going to get paid very much for that. Learning how to write sales copy, or how to set up a marketing funnel, run a paid ad campaign, grow a social media account. It's a very rare skill set these days, also very valuable. So if you'll just master one of those, you can write whatever ticket you want. And it's going to take you a good 3 years to master something, to get to where you're legit doing a great job. And then I would say after that, really 5 years to become one of the top in your industry. So from an expectation standpoint, I again went from waiting tables to making my first million in 7 years after 5 years of failure. So it took me a good 5 to 7 years before, 7 years before I actually hit the 7-figure mark.
Now, this is really cool, because I asked Mike in this upcoming question of what's really exciting for him right now, but where he takes the conversation right now, I think is really important. So please put everything down, listen, and make sure you're picking up what Mike is putting down.
Getting back to work. Getting back to work after the health challenges I went through this last year, which is always an unexpected deal. And I have to say that entrepreneurship is a high impact sport. This is not fun and games. This is one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. You are responsible for paying your bills every single month. You're responsible for bringing in that revenue. You're responsible, if legal stuff happens, you're responsible for paying your employees every month. So even if you have a small team of, let's say, 10 people, they've most likely have a spouse and or kids. You've got to wake up every day and you're really feeding 25 people before you feed yourself every single month. And you're trying to grow on top of that. And so, it's really scary. I've had 3 friends at the age of between 39 and 42 in the last 12 months die from cancer. All entrepreneurs, all phenomenal people, all very healthy people, and they're all gone now. And a couple of them have families with 3, 4 kids. One of them died today. And so this is it's a high stress, high. My one biggest piece of advice for those who are watching this is sit down and decide what you want to master, what you want to do every day, and pick a skill. Pick a skill that is aligned with you and your personality type. One of the reasons I failed for those 5 years is I was following the advice of people who were successful in an industry that required you to be very extroverted and very outgoing and be willing to network with people on a daily basis and make a lot of phone calls, and I'm very much an introvert. So for me, it was very frustrating because what I was being told to do, I was doing, but I was miserable doing it. But I was still willing to do it because if that's what I got to do, that's what I'm going to do. Until I realized when I started to finally get results, it's like, if this is what I have to do, I don't want to do this. This is not enjoyable at all. And that's a really hard decision to find position to find yourself in after 5 years of investment and time, money, and sweat into that. But then I just, really sat down and, okay, if I want to do this, how would I actually enjoy waking up and building this business? What would feel good to me? What would make me smile? What would I like to do? And I just redefined the rules and the context that I approached that business and did it through my lens and my way that fit my personality type. And that's when everything changed for me. So take people's advice, but understand that they might not be wired the same way you are mentally or physically, whatever it may be. And take it, own it, reshape it to your talents, the way your brain works, and build it in a way where you're swimming with the current instead of against it. And that was the moment that really changed everything for me. So master a skill set, do it in a way that feels good to you and that gives you energy. And at that point, it's just time. My name is Mike Dillard, and my single biggest passion in life is helping new entrepreneurs start and grow their very first business so that they can achieve financial freedom and live the kind of life that they always have wanted to live.
I really hope that you've enjoyed this conversation with myself and Mike Dillard. I'm sure that you can see why I love, respect, and just absolutely love this guy so much. He's doing such profound things, and he's just such a great quality human being as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Now, if you're joining us on YouTube, I'd love for you to comment below, and I'd love for you to let me know what is the one biggest takeaway that you're going to be able to take away from this conversation. What's the one thing that you're going to do? Because this is not about consuming more information and listening to more stuff. This is about actually using the practical, actually roll our sleeves up, get work done. So what's the one thing that you're going to do from this conversation? I'd love to know, and I'd love to be a part of that conversation with you as well. Now, if you're joining us on YouTube, I'd love for you to comment below, and I'd love for you to let me know what is the one biggest takeaway that you're going to be able to take away from this conversation. What's the one thing that you're going to do? Because this is not about consuming more information or listening to more stuff. This is about actually using the practical, actually roll our sleeves up, get work done. So what's the one thing that you're going to do from this conversation? I'd love to know, and I'd love to be a part of that conversation with you as well. If you're joining us on the podcast, I'd love for you to be able to give us a review and give us the feedback as well. Please, the easiest way for you to be able to let me know what you're getting out of this episode and out of this show is by leaving a review. As always, if you haven't subscribed, please do so, because it would be a bummer if you missed out on the upcoming interviews, on the upcoming conversations, and on the upcoming episodes. And as always, and I really do mean this, thank you so much for being here. It means an absolute tremendous amount that I get to be able to have these conversations, that I'd be able to get this and to be able to share this with you. So I hope you have an amazing day, and I'm looking forward to having you with us in the next episode.